Now we have Congresswoman Katie Porter. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be talking with you again.
You just announced your candidacy for the U.S. Senate. What would be your primary focus as senator? Why run for the U.S. Senate as opposed to where you are now in the House?
Well, I think Washington is never been more beholden to special interests, and everyday Americans' concerns about Washington not working for them have just been growing. And so I think it's really important that we have leaders in the House and in the Senate who lead by example and being willing to stand up to corruption. I've never taken corporate PAC money, and I never will. And I'm one of a handful, but a half dozen of members in either body that doesn't take federal lobbyist contributions. I think I have a track record of oversight and of being willing to call out inept government officials and corrupt CEOs to fight for the American people. And I think given the stakes for our planet, for our democracy in Washington, we need to send our best warrior, especially from a place like California.
Now, there's a concern that, you eked out a win in a House district that's historically been a red district. And I think a lot of people acknowledge that you're one of the few politicians who can win in a district like that. And this move might put that district at risk for what is otherwise a safe blue Senate seat. So what would be your response to that?
Well, I want to challenge a couple of things there. First off, my victories were powered by the team and the community and the grassroots volunteers that won these races. My name was on the ballot, but there were volunteers and staffers and donors and people who made phone calls and postcarded that made it possible. And I have every confidence that that community of support will be there for whoever chooses to run in this 47th congressional district. So I am absolutely going to lend my strong support and do the work here in Orange County to making sure that we hold that seat. The second thing is I want to remind everybody, Orange County has changed and is changing. We now have more registered Democrats than Republicans. And a big part of the challenge in this last election was that we had 70% new voters. So we just didn't have the full 2-year period to get to know those people, to earn their trust. It's an accelerated timeline caused by redistricting. So and the last thing I want to say is, look, we need to win not just this seat in the 47th district, but we need to pick up every House seat we can and every Senate seat we can. And I think one of the things I bring to this race is I am a strong competitive campaigner. I know how to win in every part and pocket of this country and every part and pocket of California. And California, both in this cycle and long term, needs to be doing its part. Having a senator that can go out and help in places like Montana or Ohio, having a senator who can raise money to make sure that every candidate has the resources they need. So for me, I love campaigning. A big part of this is being able to do that political work cycle after cycle to help us win up and down the ballot in Orange County, but also other places.
So I want to switch gears here to current news in the House. One of your current House colleagues, that's George Santos, is under pressure to resign after having been caught lying about everything. Do you think that he should resign? And also, were you impressed to learn that he scaled Mount Everest 6 times?
I think this is another example of why people don't believe that Washington is working. So this is a terrible conduct, being dishonest, and it weakens what people think of their elected officials. So I do think there need to be consequences. I would like to see the Republican caucus be leaders here and stand up and take action. But I think people deserve to know who's representing them, what their qualifications are. And if he's been dishonest with his voters, I think there should be action taken against him.
And just specifically speaking, I guess, what would you recommend on the George Santos front?
Well, I think that he's going to have to answer to his voters. And I think that there's going to be a public outcry from them to want to have someone who's elected who has represented things honestly. So I think it's appropriate that he be asked to resign because he didn't win the election fair and square. He won the election by making a series of serious misrepresentations. But ultimately, this is going to be a really pivotal moment, I think, to see, are we going to see Republicans kind of come into leadership in terms of making sure that they're holding their own members accountable, or are we going to have to continue to kind of be the moral leaders of Congress? So it's been interesting to me. He has my former House office. I moved one floor up. And so that office has definitely been in a lot of videos lately as people have gone to protest his conduct.
Yeah. Now, during the circus that was Kevin McCarthy's Speaker election vote, you were photographed reading a book titled The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Was that a commentary on what was happening that day, or was it just the world's most entertaining coincidence?
So I actually read a lot, and I've talked about this in the past on Twitter about what I like to read and highlighting authors. And so I actually had brought 3 books with me for the week. And I had one was on my iPad and 2 were hard print books, and I had finished them all because we'd had, as you know, 15 votes. So by the time I went to walk to the Capitol on that last night, I had no more books. And the prior couple days earlier, I had picked up that book at a little free library. Washington, my neighborhood, is full of little free libraries. So I picked up that book. It was the last one I had left. And I'm about 90 pages into it. It's not without controversy, the author and his thoughts, but I think I read to hear different perspectives. So it was kept me busy and kept me entertained and kept me learning during the speaker vote.
Were you surprised to see the side by side of you reading that book and completely relaxed and just the mayhem that was happening on the Republican? I mean, we had that picture of one Republican lawmaker pulling back the mouth of another Republican lawmaker while he was trying to lunge at Matt Gaetz. Were you surprised to see that side by side? Well,
I certainly was surprised to see that kind of conduct on the House floor. And I think it was an important reminder that we need to be modeling kind of calm conduct. We need to be drawing a contrast between the mayhem that the Republicans are bringing to this moment and the very unified, consistent, I think, powerful message we sent voting over and over again for Hakeem Jeffries.
Okay, so on to some more serious stuff. We've got a battle looming in the House wherein Republicans will make lifting the debt ceiling conditional upon cuts to certain programs that include Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Do you think that you'll have enough Republicans who recognize the danger in that move that would then vote for a clean debt ceiling bill that Democrats could introduce using a discharge petition?
For all Americans, regardless of their ideology, I certainly hope so, because the consequences to our economy would be devastating if we were to fail to act like responsible adults with regard to the debt ceiling. And I'll tell you, whether you're a Republican or an independent or Democrat, young, old, rural, urban, suburban, all Americans benefit from a strong and stable economy. And so I certainly hope that we can early, not at the last minute, not in the middle of a crisis, not after it does a lot of damage to the United States economic position. I hope we can early on see Republicans work with Democrats to agree to raise the debt ceiling. And I have to be clear, putting Social Security, these earned benefits on the chopping block is not how to address this problem. That is yet another action to weaken our economy, and it's to revoke basically promises that we've made to Americans who've worked hard their whole lives.
Is there any appetite among Republicans that you've spoken with? I mean, you only need a small handful of Republicans. We already heard from some, or at least one, who came forward and said that he'd be willing to vote with Democrats if Republicans couldn't get their act together. So is there a small group of Republicans who've expressed interest in doing something like this?
I think we'll see conversations really accelerate, particularly with the release of the letter from U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, giving us a concrete time frame, naming that date January 19th, which is coming up really quickly. I think those conversations are really, really going to accelerate. This past week in the House, we were very busy trying to stand up for some of our fundamental rights, including, the right to abortion was under attack, and the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. There was a lot of posturing there. And so I certainly hope that with that letter, those conversations start. And I would certainly want to talk to any Republican about why it's so important that we act with a unified front with regard to the U.S.'s global standing in terms of our economy.
Do you have any hopes for bipartisan legislation that could realistically make it out of this Republican-led House? Or do you think that their priority is expressly not working with Democrats?
Well, I certainly think there are going to be opportunities to work across the aisle. I think that what we've seen before is you have to go issue by issue, member by member, trying to find someone who's willing to step up and work with you on something. I've had bills on things like protecting seniors from getting scammed, where my partner was Dan Crenshaw. I have a bill to make sure that mothers and nursing parents are able to travel and without having their breast milk contaminated. Republican Maria Salazar is my co-sponsor on that. And so I think we have to look for those issues. I think we have to be proactive in trying to continue to do our legislative work and trying to offer good ideas and try to search for the right Republican that will support it. It's not about compromising our values. It's about being willing to have conversations.
Okay, let's finish off with this. If you could pass one piece of legislation that's not the obvious stuff, it's not voting rights legislation or codifying Roe, but something kind of like left of center, out of the norm, what would that be?
Well, I think the obvious answer, if barring the Supreme, I only have two answers, because one is I'm blocked by the Supreme Court, and that is to deal with corporate PAC money and deal with the influence of special interests in Congress. And of course, the Citizens United decision, is a huge problem for this, which is why we need to end it. I think the more straightforward one is to ban congressional stock trading. Over and over and over again, we hear from Americans that they believe that their elected leaders are working to enrich themselves rather than to deliver a just society and a strong economy. And so I was proud to join with colleagues who've already begun to introduce legislation on this Congress, and I was a real leader in pressing for it in the past. So I think we have to tackle the lack of trust in Washington, because without that trust in us, makes it all the more difficult for us to have conversations amongst us as Democrats, as progressives, but also across the aisle.
I should also ask, how can we help your campaign?
You can go to my Senate website, katieporter.com. You can learn more about this campaign, about how we're gonna run it, what our key priority issues are, and reach out and let us know. If you're a Californian and you'd like to have me come visit or engage with your group, please invite me. But katieporter.com remains my website. There's a lot more information on there for people, and I think we're looking forward to being able to really connect with Californians, listen to communities. I've taken a lot of pride in being able to be a strong kind of retail campaigner in a congressional district, and you have to put in a lot of work to do that in a big state like California, and that's what I'm ready to get doing.
Awesome. We'll leave it there. Congresswoman Porter, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.